Alright guys, so in this video I did want to discuss another YouTube video that I came across in regards to September 11th. Some firefighters right outside of Ground Zero on September 11th, it's probably about 12:30, maybe 1 o'clock in the afternoon, being interviewed with two of the firefighters pretty adamant that they heard three different explosions within the Twin Towers, and they're very clear and very adamant, 2 or 3 hours after this event, of them being, I want to say, inside the North Tower. They really didn't confirm it, but it sounded like they were inside the North Tower. And if you actually watched the interview, as they're right outside of Ground Zero, they basically say that they were in the lobby of the North Tower as it was collapsing, potentially something like that. Again, it's hard to make it out exactly where they were because just the interview, and it's right after the event happened, obviously, but the one firefighter was very abundantly clear that there were three different separate explosions. And obviously people say, well, they blew up the building, things like that. It becomes a little bit of a conspiracy. And that's something I also wanted to talk about. What explosion could they potentially have heard? And other people saying, well, it was actually the elevators, because there was a fireball that came down all of the elevator shafts when the planes hit the building. The question is, what is the exact timeline of when they heard these explosions? Because it very easily could have been the elevators. It just depends. If these gentlemen were in the North Tower, they were clear, they said that they got there after the planes hit, and then they heard explosions after that. Could it be one of the elevator shafts dropping? I'm guessing that's probably what it is. I know people are going to say, well, that's the explosions from the building collapsing. It's kind of a strange interview, and it's situation with it being right after. You're not going to get all the information, but it does sound like they insinuate that the North Tower collapsed on top of them. At least that's what I got from it. But in terms of there being some type of explosion, inside the North or South Tower, people saying there's no way, it's not possible in terms of a plane actually causing either of those two buildings to fall. There are some key things I want to touch on. And listen, I'm not against conspiracies. I get it. A lot of it's bad. The government lies all the time. I understand. But there is an issue in terms of trying to prove that when you look at, I'm sure many people know the video I'm referencing, the one video looking directly at specifically the South Tower and the way that it falls, and actually seeing in the upscaled HD video, you're looking at the side of where the plane entered, where there's a massive hole, you're seeing it burning, and you can see for about 5 seconds the tower is going to collapse. Like it starts leaning inward. You can see it over the span of 5 seconds. So the idea in the South Tower that there was some type of explosive detonation that was used to bring the building down, the building would not act like that. You also have to understand, in looking at the way the South Tower collapses, obviously the North Tower, it's a lot harder to see how it collapses because the South Tower collapses and there's a bunch of smoke. But if you actually watch that one video, the wall caves in on itself, and the top of the tower actually falls at an angle. And that would suggest that the walls lost total integrity and caved in and just gave out on themselves where the plane entered, which would make sense. And another thing it's important to note, and people don't talk about this, the localized core, and it's not even just the core in general, it's also the way the towers were built in comparison to something like the Empire State Building. Obviously, the core design was different, with the towers having basically no support, which enabled there to be no walls, but also made it easier for the towers to fall. That's another thing that people seem to gloss over. So listen, when it comes to there possibly being, again, I can't really talk about the North Tower, but it does make sense that the towers would fall differently because of the way the towers were impacted. This was not a situation where the North Tower and the South Tower were hit directly square on. And there's another conspiracy that I do hear, and it's important to understand, people can believe what they want, that's fine, but you do need context to the situation. People saying that, well, there was nobody in the airplanes, they directed the planes with a drone or something to be flown into the towers. The problem with that, the North Tower, I can understand, it was flown directly into the center. That was controlled by Mohammed Atta, or I guess, if you want to believe a conspiracy, it was controlled by somebody outside the plane completely. The issue revolves once again around the South Tower. Okay, now if there was somebody controlling the plane, the rapid descent of the plane that was hitting the South Tower and the area at which it impacted the South Tower, nearly missing it completely, you would think if there was someone on the outside controlling that plane, it was like the hijacker pilot misjudged where he was in the air, which honestly would make sense. The dude really hasn't flown. I mean, you take flight classes in Florida, but there's just no way that they would approach. If somebody who's like an expert and controlling the plane from outside, you're not going to approach the South Tower like that to where you have to literally nosedive into it. All right, it wasn't a nosedive, but you can see the plane descending rapidly as it hits the South Tower. The North Tower, again, was totally different. It was hit head on. We got to use context with some of this stuff, but nonetheless, this is a very interesting video with these firefighters coming outside, and I haven't seen these guys. It's like, are they not doing interviews? The original YouTube video, all the comments are deleted. There's like 7,000 likes on the video. There's only 24 comments. I don't know what's going on with that. Again, I'm not saying anything. I've actually defended the towers falling via the planes in this video. But nonetheless, that video of those firefighters, raw footage directly hours after, maybe not even hours, maybe like minutes after the second tower falls, where they're saying and they're adamant they heard multiple different explosions. It wasn't just two, which would be the planes hitting the sides of the towers. It was possibly more. And again, we just don't know the exact timeline of when they heard those explosions in comparison to the other possible third explosion that they heard, which I do believe probably had to do with an elevator shaft. I do not believe the fireballs in the elevators happened like immediately after the towers were hit. I think it had some time, and also possibly elevators just falling down the entire Twin Towers, making large banging noises when they hit the ground, when they hit the base or the lobby or whatever. So it could have been a number of things, but the video is interesting nonetheless because they are adamant. And again, it could be something to do with the elevators. I would imagine it would be that. We just don't know the exact timeline of it, but obviously people are going to speculate. They're going to say, well, they used explosive devices to blow up the towers. It's just very hard to believe that based on the one angle we have where the building is literally collapsing in slow motion for 5 seconds with a total loss of integrity on the side where there's a giant hole, and that's why the top of the South Tower collapses at an angle. It's not really attached to the building. It's based off of where the plane entered the South Tower. So it's interesting. I would take a look at it, and the video is very strange. It's like they restricted it or they censored it. I'm not sure exactly, but I just get recommended this stuff. I've got like a different type of algorithm for my phone. It's a bunch of 9/11 stuff. My iPad's different, but it was just something interesting, and very likely it had something to do with the elevators. In terms of them using explosives to blow it up, it's just based on the video of the South Tower. I mean, the North Tower, listen, I don't know. I'm not going to get into that, but I would be shocked. I just think the way the North Tower fell, the reason it was different was because the plane entered the North Tower a different way, smack dab in the middle, as opposed to the South Tower, which caused the South Tower to kind of sag on one side, as opposed to the weight being, I guess, equally distributed like in the North Tower. Either way, guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.